the second seminar in the NOAA Environmental Leadership Seminar Series, and thanks for joining us. The goal of this seminar series is to showcase NOAA's leadership in environmental science by those who lead it and make it happen. My name is Tracy Gill, and I am one of 4 coordinators for this seminar. First, I want to thank the NOAA Research Council for their support of this series. I also want to thank the team of NOAA colleagues working together to make these seminars happen. Hernan Garcia with NESDIS, Sandra Klar with the Joint Center for Satellite Data Assimilation, Katie Rowley with the Office of Oceanic Atmospheric Research, and Katie's back of the door. And I'm sorry, I lost my place. And Eric Daniels with NOAA's National Centers for Coastal Ocean Science, who's right beside us, helping us with IT and logistical support, and Vernon Cooper from Folger Pratt. Before we start, here are a few seminar logistics. For those in the room, please hold your questions until the end, and please mute your phones. For those online, you can type your questions into the Q&A chat pod at any time, and we will get to them at the end of the seminar. Looking ahead, we have a great seminar or speaker lineup, and there's a handout at the back of the room for that, which includes a link to the NOAA Environmental Leadership Seminar webpage with information on upcoming seminars, speakers, dates, and locations, and also past seminars. And that link will also be available in the chat for folks online. Actually, it's there right now. And so today, the second speaker in the NOAA Environmental Leadership Seminar Series is Dr. Cynthia Decker, NOAA's Scientific Integrity Officer at NOAA's Office of Atmospheric Research. Dr. Decker will present Fostering a Culture of Scientific Integrity at NOAA. But first, a little background on Dr. Decker. Cynthia J. Decker is the NOAA Scientific Integrity Officer and Executive Director of the NOAA Science Advisory Board, or SAB. She is the primary point of contact in the agency for all matters pertaining to scientific and research misconduct, working with the Deputy Undersecretary for Operations and NOAA Research Council on these matters. She serves as a designated federal official for the SAB, overseeing all of their activities and ensuring coordination of NOAA input to them, as well as facilitating communication between the board and various NOAA activities. She also oversees the work of SAB's 4 standing working groups. Prior to coming to NOAA in 2006, Dr. Decker was the Deputy Chief of the External Programs Branch for the Oceanographer of the Navy. This office is responsible for coordination at the policy level of Navy operational oceanography and meteorology programs with other military services, civilian agencies, and international organizations. Dr. Decker was formerly the Director of Research for the Consortium for Oceanographic Research and Education, or CORE, now the Consortium for Ocean Leadership, which represents over 100 academic, government, industry, and nonprofit ocean institutions around the U.S. At CORE, Cynthia was also Director of the International Secretariat for the Census of Marine Life and Executive Director for the National Oceanographic Partnership Program. She received her Ph.D. in Coastal Oceanography from the State University of New York at Stony Brook and her Master's in Zoology from Louisiana State University. She has also worked for the U.S. Office of Naval Research, running a marine environmental research program, and for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, where she administered an estuarine management program on behalf of the state. So welcome, Dr. Decker, and thank you for your leadership and for participating in the NOAA Environmental Leadership Seminar Series. Take it away.
Good afternoon. This is Cynthia Decker. Can you all hear me online? Yes. Yeah. We're here to talk about fostering a culture of scientific integrity in NOAA. Thank you all for coming. Thank you folks on the webinar. Sorry that you missed the beginning, and I'll repeat everything for your benefit. The first thing I'd like to do is give everyone a definition of scientific integrity. This is a fairly generic definition, and I will admit, which I didn't originally to the people in the room, that I did take this definition from somewhere else. So I freely admit to plagiarism. But it applies to conducting, reporting, and applying the results of research. I would also add to that planning for research, so in proposal writing, for example. The goal is to ensure objectivity, clarity, and reproducible of scientific findings and results. And it also insulates us from bias, a whole list of adjectives here: bias, fabrication, falsification, plagiarism, inappropriate influence, political interference, censorship, and inadequate procedural and information security. So there's a lot of things that are covered under scientific integrity. I'd also like to ask, who is scientific integrity? Well, it covers NOAA scientists, program managers, and technical staff, covers NOAA policy staff, and I would also argue that it includes NOAA administrative support, budget support. Basically, anybody in the agency who touches science or who has some connection to science would be covered. It also covers contractors and CI employees and grantees. Anybody who is involved with NOAA science should be responsible for scientific integrity. So you are all scientific integrity. Just a quick note about NOAA's mission. NOAA's mission is science, service, and stewardship. Note that science is the first word in that list. That is because science is the foundation of everything we do at NOAA. It underpins everything we do. And therefore, it is incredibly important that our science is credible and that people believe in it and that people believe that what we do is backed in fact and that there is nothing wrong with our science, essentially. So that was sort of a little sense of an overview of where I'm coming from with scientific integrity. But this slide is just to tell you where I'm going with the rest of the talk. So it's a really quick outline of where I'm going to be heading with this. So first of all, I'd like to talk about the NOAA Administrative Order 202-735D, which is on scientific integrity. This came out of a 2010 memo that was issued by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. John Holdren put out this memo requesting all agencies to develop a scientific integrity policy. This came out of some rather questionable behavior that occurred under the previous administration. And so as a result of that memo, the Department of Commerce issued a memo in 2011 that told all of its bureaus that they should establish scientific integrity policies. So indeed, NOAA and NIST, and I'm not sure if other bureaus did, but certainly NOAA and NIST developed their own scientific integrity policies in response to the White House memo and the subsequent Department of Commerce memo. So the purpose of this memo was to strengthen widespread confidence in our science and from the general public. It was put in place to denote NOAA's commitment to a culture of excellence and to support NOAA's principal science asset, its employees. I don't know if you can read the caption to the cartoon down there, but the caption basically shows one science, perhaps a supervisor, talking to another scientist and saying, you are completely free to carry out whatever research you want as long as you come to these conclusions. And as the arrow says, that's what we're trying to avoid with scientific integrity. So the scope of scientific integrity, I mentioned this a little bit earlier when I asked who was scientific integrity, but this actually talks about what the NAO covers. And the NAO covers all NOAA employees, both career and political. It covers contractors, partners, cooperative institute employees, and grantees. Anyone receiving a financial assistance award, any kind of funding from NOAA, is covered under this scientific integrity policy. So under our NAO, these are the specific things that are covered by our policy. Fabrication, falsification, plagiarism are what I would sort of call classic research misconduct. NOAA's always had a process for handling these sorts of things. They were generally under the Office of the Inspector General. They weren't done separately in a separate office. But this NAO took those things and then added interference and put it all under the single NOAA administrative order. So we handle allegations of research misconduct or scientific misconduct on all of these things. And the question is, for you, is what does the scientific integrity officer do when there is misconduct discovered? We correct the scientific record, or we make recommendations on how the scientific record can be corrected. My office does not engage in personnel actions. So if there's been some scientific misconduct discovered, or even if there's something that's gone wrong that's discovered to be the result of an error that's not misconduct, we make recommendations about how that can be fixed. And then we refer the individual or individuals to their supervisor, and then their supervisor makes the decisions about how that's handled, how the individual's handled. So I'm going to have a couple of slides now that basically talk about sort of misconduct and aspects of policy and some things about what misconduct is not. So just a reminder that science and scholarship in NOAA are important, but there are other considerations that are done in NOAA's policymaking process. And those can include things like budget or institutional, cultural, or legal considerations. So science is not always the primary thing that's taken into consideration when you create a policy. I only say that because sometimes we get questions where someone is quite upset because there's been a policy established and they feel like the science has not been sufficiently taken into consideration. And sometimes we circle back and discover that maybe there's been a legal constraint, for example, that means that they couldn't do quite as much as they would have liked to. So there's examples like that. There's also scientific misconduct also doesn't involve decisions about disagreement with decisions about office or personnel actions. It doesn't apply to honest error, and it doesn't apply to differences of scientific opinions. I'm going to look at the next one a little more.
Excuse me, Cynthia. We're getting a lot of concerns that you're moving around a lot, and the signs. No, but it's really the mic. I know this isn't your fault.
No, it's this mic that people are, and I should have coached you on this beforehand. If you can kind of stand in one position relative to this mic,
Okay.
then they'll do that.
Sorry about that.
No, it's your fault.
All right. Sorry. So difference of opinion. This is a really simplistic example. So you've got a glass of water or a glass of fluid. So the vessel, what the vessel is may not necessarily be in dispute. The fluid in the vessel may not be in dispute. The volume of the fluid may not be in dispute. However, because you're scientists, some of you may call it half empty, some may call it half full. And it results in a discussion. Scientists approach things differently. We have found in our work with scientific integrity that often we get approached by people who are passionate about their research. They're incredibly passionate about the results. They're incredibly passionate about the interpretation of their results. And they will bring it to us situations where they believe there's been research misconduct. And what it often comes down to, or sometimes I should say comes down to, is a difference of scientific opinion. And you have to figure that out. You have to work that out. But I just bring that up to note that sometimes your colleague is an idiot, and sometimes your colleague is actually doing something wrong, but you have to figure out the difference. So, scientific integrity. Overall, what's important in our agency? The things in the memo and in our policy concern largely the free flow of information. NOAA encourages, under our policy, the publication of data and results. We do require internal review of publications. The guidelines for that are established under the Framework Guidance on Fundamental Research Communications. This comes out of a department administrative order on public communications, which has a section on fundamental research communications. NOAA also encourages communication of results with the media and with the public. However, under no circumstances under our policy may a NOAA official ask or direct NOAA scientists or other employees to suppress or alter their findings. And NOAA ensures the free flow of information by maintaining integrity and traceability of data. So that's sort of another interpretation of integrity, maintaining your data integrity. The policy also goes towards maintaining and promoting excellence in the workforce by ensuring that our scientists are able to assume leadership positions in professional societies, what we call our service on boards policy, which was worked out with Department of Commerce. NOAA also tries to ensure that the selection and retention of scientific employees is done in the appropriate way, and that we get the correct experts and we get the right person for the right job, and that's done in the right way. I didn't put this on the slide, but another part of the language also talks about federal advisory committees and making sure that we ensure we put the right experts for the right problems and the right questions on our federal advisory committees as well. So this is sort of a generic slide that talks about the reasons that we see research misconduct. There's a really amazing little website called Retraction Watch, which is kind of addictive if you are in scientific integrity. It has all sorts of articles about people that have been discovered basically doing bad things. A lot of it, I will say, is in the medical realm. It's not in environmental science. It's a lot of medical research because the dollar amounts in medical research are huge. Millions and millions of dollars go into funding medical research, and I think the temptation is great to falsify and fabricate and plagiarize. And The National Academy did a study that came out in 2017, so some of these conclusions are drawn from that study. And the reasons that they came up with for why there's a lot of research misconduct is universities are producing more highly trained students than the workforce can absorb. A lot of Ph.D. students coming out, and they need to differentiate themselves from the rest of the students coming out, and so that they can try and get a job somewhere. There are declining success rates for grant funds. I think if you look at the statistics for some, I don't know what they are for NOAA, but I know that I saw a statistic for NSF, which has shown sort of a steadily declining success rates for the grant proposals coming for NSF. So more people applying for the same amount of money or amount of money that's only increasing slightly. So the success rate is decreasing. There's also an increasing reliance on external funds for faculty salaries. Some of you may realize that at universities you could pretty much count on getting a tenure track position, so you'd at least get 9 months of your salary, so maybe you only had to generate money for your summer salary, but those tenure track positions are fewer and fewer. If you get a position, it might not be tenured, it might be a research faculty position, so you have to generate your entire salary. So coupled with, you know, the declining success rates for grants and things like that, it gets harder and harder. So they attributed a lot of the research misconduct to what they called a hyper-competitive research environment, and that's why you often see more sort of a rise in research misconduct, at least in the medical field. So I'd like to talk now about what the Scientific Integrity Office can do to help you. There's a lot of things, you know, we certainly deal with allegations of scientific misconduct, but there's a lot of things that are related to scientific integrity that come to us that we try and help with, or we work with other offices in NOAA. The implementation of the Fundamental Research Communication Guidelines. This was developed by the Research Council. The Research Council put it out to the line offices, so each of the line offices now has a process for internal review of fundamental research communications. Everyone should be aware of those and should be working with their line to implement those. Authorship designation or disputes. Sometimes what looks like a misconduct allegation turns out to simply be an authorship dispute. We have encountered those. The National Academy actually, again, did a study, and they came out with a set of best practices for authorship. So the Scientific Integrity Committee is thinking of looking at those. Predatory journal practices. I don't know if many of you are familiar with predatory journals. We've been working with the library on this one. Predatory journals are journals that are online. They may approach scientists and suggest that they publish their papers in them. They sound really good. They have good titles. They may even have a really great website. They claim to do peer review. They may show an editorial board that looks very reputable. But it turns out that in many cases, they're scams. Those people are not, in fact, on an editorial board. They poached their pictures and put them up, and those individuals may not even realize that they're listed as being on that board, or they may have been asked to be on a board, but they don't realize what it is they've been asked to do, but they don't, in fact, play an active role on that so-called journal. And what they exist to do is to basically take your money. They'll charge a lot to publish your paper, and they may, in fact, publish it online. But after a few years, they may fold up their tent and go away, and fold up the website and go away, and your publication goes away because it's only published online and your publication no longer exists. So we're working with the library to figure out a way to help develop some criteria to identify predatory journals and then get that information out to all of our scientists so that they will be able to identify predatory journals and do a better job of avoiding them. There's peer review standards, which is something that comes up under the Information Quality Act. We get asked questions about peer review standards, or it comes up sometimes under discussions of the Fundamental Research Communication Guidelines. And then, because this scientific integrity policy applies to grantees and cooperative institutes and contracts, we worked with the Grants Management Division to put up, actually not for contracts, but worked with the Grants Management Division to develop some financial assistance award language about scientific integrity that now goes out with every grant, and essentially says we have a scientific integrity policy, if at your institution one of your PI is accused, there's an allegation of research misconduct against your PI, we expect you to investigate it, and we expect you to report back to NOAA what was the result of that investigation so that we can take action. So that language goes out with every award, and we have copies of that, but I'm not sure if every one of our programs is aware of that and understands the implications for that. And finally, there are communications guidelines that our communications folks put out, and we are working with them to make sure that that scientists understand what their rights are under the communications policy. So this gets down to what you need to do. And since science is the foundation of everything you do, you are all in a position to support and help the scientific integrity enterprise by supporting and applying these rules of conduct that are in the policy. There's a code of conduct for scientists, and there's a code of conduct for science managers and for supervisors, and that's all in the procedural handbook. And this is a list of the resources that are available. We have a website, the Scientific Integrity Commons, which is under the Research Council website. You'll find the NAO and its procedural handbook. You'll find the Department Administrative Order on Communications. You'll find information about the Scientific Integrity Committee, which I did not much talk about. There is, in fact, a Scientific Integrity Officer for each line office. You may not be totally aware of that. They're a little stealthy, but we work with them. We form a committee. We have the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer represented on that committee. We have the Office of General Counsel represented on that committee. So that committee meets to try and address sort of larger issues of scientific integrity. And I'm happy to say that there is now an online training module for scientific integrity. We just finished it up last, I think it was December. It's loaded up on the Commerce Learning Center. You can go on the Commerce Learning Center and type in scientific integrity and access the training. Anyone in NOAA can take it. Any federal employee can take it. It's also accessible, as it turns out, to NIST, because NIST wanted to be able to provide training, although it's quite a NOAA-centric training. I think it takes about 45 minutes, but it is available to any NOAA employee. And feel free to take it. I would encourage you to take it. It'll give you a lot more details, a lot more scenarios, a lot more than I've just given you in this brief talk. And then finally at the bottom, I've given you the address. If there is an allegation, if you feel that you have encountered something which you believe is scientific misconduct, we encourage you, first of all, to give me a call or to call your line office scientific integrity officer and sort of say, hey, I think that I've got something going on here, and I think it would really benefit from talking with you. And we're happy to do that, sort of a consultation. But if, even if you don't do that, or if after that you decide you really want to file an allegation of misconduct, the way to do that is to send it to this address, research.misconduct@noaa.gov. It goes to me, and it goes to the person who actually has the highest oversight over scientific integrity in the agency, which is the Deputy Undersecretary for Operations, in this case, Ben Friedman. So Ben will get the email, and I will get the email, and then we'll move forward from there through our process, which is outlined in the procedural handbook. So if you have specific questions about that, please feel free to ask. And this is our scientific integrity policy in a seashell. And I'm going to end on this slide. There is a slide afterwards that has my contact information, but I'm going to end on this slide. And if there are any questions, I'm ready to answer them, I hope. Thank you.
Questions in the room?
Somebody will have to wave their hand or jump up.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yes.
Towards the end, the deputy undersecretary's role, to expand a little bit on what the deputy undersecretary's role is vis-a-vis the scientific integrity policy.
So Ben has the overall. Ben's the highest. The deputy undersecretary for operations is the highest level civilian in the agency. So that individual has the ultimate responsibility for making decisions about scientific integrity. So if there's an allegation, for example, we'll run the process for it, but the Deputy Undersecretary for Operations is what's called the determining official. So so the deputy undersecretary makes the final decision on any allegation. I'll bring it up to him, and then he'll make the final decision. I will also note that the Research Council, under the chairmanship of the NOAA chief scientist, when there is a chief scientist, also has authority over the scientific integrity policy documents. So when we revised the procedural handbook a couple of years ago, that went through the Research Council. So the Research Council sort of kind of monitored that and administered that process. So does that cover it, or did you want to say more?
No.
Okay.
And if there are other questions in the room, just for the folks online, would you mind coming up and speaking into the mic so that they can also hear it, or we can repeat it? Go ahead.
So the question was whether or not the AA, the assistant administrator, would be the determining official. So that is, no, when we revised the procedural handbook, we made the deputy undersecretary the determining official. If there's a situation where the deputy undersecretary believes he or she has a conflict of interest, it can be sent over to an AA instead. But otherwise, it goes to the deputy undersecretary. Yeah.
Can you speak up into the mic? Would you mind? I'm sorry.
This is Tom Gleason. This is Tom Gleason, our Office of General Counsel.
Thanks, Tom.
And I just wanted to touch on the role of the AA. If an allegation goes all the way through and that allegation is determined to be substantiated, founded, and the DUSO agrees with the recommendation that, yes, scientific misconduct happened and these particular individuals engaged in scientific misconduct, that report would go to the managers of that NOAA employee and the AA in that employee's chain of management. And they would then handle it from there. Notably, the disciplinary process is not handled as part of the scientific integrity process, and I think you touched on that.
I did touch on that.
So, for example,
So, for example, it turned out that somebody had falsified their data and published a paper, and we got an allegation about that, and we went through a whole process to determine if that was true, and found out that it was in fact true. The recommendation from the Scientific Integrity Office would be to the Deputy Undersecretary would be, yes, you should make a finding of scientific misconduct, and our recommendation is that that paper should be withdrawn, that the journal should be contacted and the paper should be withdrawn. That's our recommendation for how the scientific record would be corrected. Then it would be up to the Deputy Undersecretary to agree with that, and if he does, then he would also notify the AA and the chain of command, and then there would be a disciplinary decision about the employee.
Okay, how about we take a question online? David Landsman asks, does NOAA keep a public list of negative findings or recommendations from your reviews?
Yes, we publish an annual report every year, and we list all of the allegations that were made and the disposition of them. In some cases, they may not have been wrapped up in that year, and we'll just say it's ongoing. Those annual reports are posted on our website. At least I think they still are. Our website's undergoing a revamp, so I'll have to double check to make sure the annual reports are still there. But yes, there's an annual report that lists those out.
Okay, and then we have another question from Sandra Starkweather. Some societies, e.g. AGU, have included harassment and other types of inequitable behavior based on protected class as a violation of scientific integrity. Can you speak to the state of the dialogue on this within NOAA?
So we've kept that separate. I know that some of the professional societies have done that, but that is under, I think, EEO in NOAA, and that's where it stays. This is purely about, as I said, falsification, fabrication, plagiarism, and interference. I will point out that some agencies even separate those, sort of the fabrication, falsification, plagiarism for NIST, for example, had a process in place for handling those and continues to have a process, but their scientific integrity, which addresses the interference issue that OSTP raised, is a separate office and a separate process in their agency. So they've kept them completely separate.
And we have a question. I hate to ask you to come up here.
Actually, it's not a question, Cynthia, just a follow-up to the annual report. The annual report.
Are they in there? Okay. So someone checked to see if the annual reports were still linked online on the Research Integrity Commons and said they are, so yay. Because at one point our website was being reworked and some stuff fell off and I wasn't sure if it had all gotten back on. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question from David Dye. I am at CMAS, one of the joint institutes. Who would be my point of contact for questions about the policy and processes relating to scientific integrity?
So your university.
Okay.
Every university has what's called a Research Integrity Office, or RIO. And so for a university, you go to your RIO and ask them what their process is.
Are there other questions in the room? Okay, here's a question. Jeff Rook says, in recent years, several NOAA fisheries actions have been overturned in court on the grounds that the agency had been arbitrary and capricious. Many of those rulings involved agency mischaracterization on the state of science. Are these adverse rulings ever reviewed by the NOAA SI program?
No, but I would also look at my OGC person, Tom Gleason. No.
No, again, separate process.
That's a separate process.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Suzanne Bricker asks, how can we access that report? And you pointed out that it's on the Scientific Integrity Commons, right? Okay.
I will tell you, I have not done the 2019 report. So the most recent annual report is 2018, and my apologies, I just haven't done 2019.
Okay, and Don Collins provided the link for us, and FRC. Okay, thanks, Don. Are there other questions in the room? I have a quick question. The communications guidelines, are they on the Commons as well? You said communications guidelines.
They
So I thought those would be nice to.
They are. But I think when I checked that link today, it didn't work.
Just check
so
that.
I don't know if that's because, so I don't know if that's because the link is broken on my end or if they moved the communications guidance and so the link doesn't work for that reason. So I had made a note to myself that I needed to check on that.
Thank you. So. Great to have stuff online. People won't be bothering you all the time. They can just check it out. Yeah. There's just lots of comments. I'm trying to get through them all. I think that's about it. Are there any other questions in the room or online? Last chance.
Mary and I have been going back and forth about which one if I should ask this question. Are you at liberty to talk about the status of the inquiry that Craig McLean launched into the White House? Yeah. Sharpie plus the hurricane portion of the forecast that came out.
And you'll have to repeat the question.
So they asked if I was at liberty to discuss the issue that Craig McLean raised. I believe in the press it was called Sharpiegate. The answer to that is no. I'm not at liberty to discuss it.
Were the results of that investigation included or is that public or does that remain confidential?
It remains confidential.
However, a summary would be available.
In the annual report.
Oh, okay. A summary would be available in the annual report. Okay. Ryan Mata asks, where are the line office contacts?
The line office contacts. They're individuals. They're scattered throughout the lines. I mean, they're not in any particular place in the lines. I can out them. Let's see if I can remember them all. It's like a quiz. So for OMAO, it's Solomon Tadele. For NIMS, it's Stephanie Oakes. For NOS, it's John Ramsdell. For Nestis, it's Bob Kulagowski. For Weather Service, it's Peter Rohr. For OAR, she's brand new. Her name's Pam Heinzelman. And I think that's it. Did I get everybody? OGC, Tom Gleason. And our OCAO contact is Jeremy Andrusik.
Great. Yeah. And Brian says thank you. Aaron Sweeney asks, when does the Inspector General get involved?
Oh, that's a good question. We have talked with the Inspector General a couple of times for a couple of reasons. First of all, they used to handle the allegations of what we call FFP. It used to be all Inspector General. So actually, they're very happy that they don't have to handle those. But they still sometimes get the allegations. So sometimes they will send them over to us and say, we think this is scientific integrity, so research misconduct, and we think you should handle it. And sometimes we get things that look more like they could be fraud, and we will send it over to them. So that's kind of the nature of that relationship. Sometimes a scientific misconduct allegation could conceivably evolve into something that does result in being fraud, and in which case OIG may decide to get involved at the end of it. So that could happen as well.
Okay, thanks. And Don Collins asks, regarding publications, are there clear guidelines for NOAA federal authors about copyright ownership when publishing NOAA content in commercial science journals, e.g. AGU or Nature?
So no, federal employees don't have copyright protection. So that's the answer to that. No, sorry. So if a journal says, you know, or a professional society says, can we publish this? Can we have your permission? The answer is yes, because we're government employees and anything we publish is open and available to the public.
Oh boy, this is a long one. I don't know about this one.
Mm-hmm.
And offers 154 all academics or private sector or something else. Does that fit for an author then force that publication to be uncopyrighted?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I mean, I think it depends on what the author's contribution is. So I'm sorry, the question was, what if the NOAA person is one of 54 authors? I think it would depend on the contribution of the NOAA person. If the NOAA person was contributing, say, data, then the data would be free and open to the public, but I'm not sure that the publication has to be free and open, but I'm not sure of that. That's a good question. May have to look into that. So, yeah, thank you for the question.
And then Don Collins says, related to his question about regarding pubs, it is about signing over rights to the publisher. That's what he says. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Daniel Melendez says, can a NOAA researcher be effectively muzzled by denying funds for publication? Is that a science integrity issue?
It could be. If they can prove that that's why they're being muzzled. I mean, in all of these cases, just as it would be with any other situation, there has to be some evidence that that is in fact the case.
Okay.
So.
Okay, are there any more questions? Questions online? I think that's it. Well, thank you, Cynthia.
All right.
And folks online, if you're interested in getting copies of the PDF or MP4, we'll include that link. And next month, our next seminar will be Tuesday, March 10th at 2 p.m. The seminar will be titled What It Takes to Build a Weather-Ready Nation by Lou Usolini, Assistant Administrator of NOAA's National Weather Service. Thanks for joining us today. Bye-bye.